Joe and Ellie had been married for 7 years, their relationship a quiet rhythm of routine and unspoken compromises. But lately, Ellie had grown restless. One evening, over a tense dinner of barely touched lasagna, she set her fork down and looked Joe square in the eye. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "I want an open relationship. I need more than this. If you don't agree, I'm leaving." Joe froze, his heart sinking into his stomach. He'd never seen this coming. Ellie had always been the one to push boundaries, but this was a grenade lobbed into the life they'd built. He loved her, messy, stubborn Ellie, but the ultimatum stung. Still, he wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. "Fine," he said after a long pause, his jaw tight. "But if we're doing this, I have a condition." Ellie raised an eyebrow, leaning back in her chair. "What's that?" "Cassie," Joe said simply, watching her reaction. Ellie's smirk faltered. Cassie was her best friend, tall, confident, and undeniably gorgeous, with a figure that turned heads and a not-so-secret crush on Joe that Ellie had laughed off for years. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," Joe said, his voice calm but edged with something darker. "If we're opening things up, I get to see Cassie. That's my deal." Ellie's face hardened, but she didn't back down. She'd pushed him this far, she couldn't flinch now. "Fine," she snapped. "Do whatever you want. I don't care." But she did care. She cared a lot. At first, it was just a game to her. Ellie started seeing a guy from work, some smarmy sales type with a loud laugh and too much cologne. She'd come home late, dropping hints about her fun, expecting Joe to squirm. But Joe didn't squirm. He didn't even ask. Instead, he started spending time with Cassie. It began innocently enough, coffee dates, long talks. Cassie had always been warm and easygoing, a stark contrast to Ellie's sharp edges. But soon, Joe was coming home with a lightness in his step that Ellie hadn't seen in years. He'd smile to himself, humming tunes she didn't recognize. And then there were the nights he didn't come home at all. Ellie tried to shrug it off. She told herself she was fine, that this was what she'd wanted. Freedom. But the emptiness crept in. Her fling with the sales guy fizzled out, he was too shallow, too predictable. Meanwhile, Joe and Cassie grew closer. Ellie caught them once, laughing together at a cafe, Cassie's hand brushing Joe's arm. The sight twisted something deep inside her. One night, Joe came home to pack a bag. Ellie stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her voice trembling, despite her effort to sound indifferent. "What's this?" "I'm staying with Cassie for a while," Joe said, folding a shirt with deliberate care. "She gets me, Ellie. She doesn't need to twist my arm to feel alive." Ellie's chest tightened. "You're leaving me? For her?" Joe paused, meeting her gaze. "You wanted this. You gave me the choice, and I made it." "That's not fair," she sputtered, desperation creeping in. "I didn't mean for what?" Joe cut in, his voice low but firm. "For me to find someone who actually wants me as I am? You don't get to rewrite the rules now." He zipped the bag and walked past her, leaving the house quiet except for the echo of the door shutting. Ellie sank onto the couch, staring at the half-eaten lasagna still on the table from weeks ago, now a stale relic of their last real conversation. She'd thought she could control him. But she'd miscalculated. Months later, she saw them at the grocery store. Joe and Cassie, hand in hand, picking out avocados like some perfect, effortless teen. Cassie leaned in to whisper something, and Joe laughed, a sound Ellie hadn't heard from him in forever. Her stomach churned with regret, bitter and heavy. She'd gambled their marriage for a thrill, and in the end, she'd lost him to the one person she never thought could take him. Ellie turned away, clutching her cart, alone with the weight of what she'd done.